NFL Week 12 is here, so it is once again time to navigate those starts and sits for our fantasy football rosters. We've got 4 bye weeks this weekend. How much are they going to impact our choices?
Yeah, there's a few important cogs who will be missing. Starting off with the Broncos. So you're going to be without Bo Nix and RJ Harvey. No need to be disappointed by Cortland Sutton. But you do also lose the newfound flex spot value of Troy Franklin. For the Chargers, Herbert, currently QB4, gets a rest after that Week 11 shocker. And we're without 4 pass-catching options, Keenan Allen, Lad McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and Aronde Gadsden. Given Johnston's up and down stat lines, that's going to be a bit of a blessing. You don't need to worry whether to put him in or not. Dolphins, Achan's having a great season. Waddle's been better this season. And the 23% of leagues rostering him are without Tua. Commanders, we lose Debo and Zach Ertz, along with the now eternally disappointing Jacoby Krosky-Merritt. So, who can we rely on in Week 12, Mark?
Well, these 6 will not let you down because we are naming the starts of the week, and that's just how it works. First one, I think, is now obvious. He won't be making an appearance in starts of the week ever again after this week. I just had to mention him because he's going to have a monstrous week. So regardless of the cost, he could cost you £10,000 in fantasy game day. You would plug him in this week. Travion Henderson, he's got the Bengals, giving up the most fantasy points per game to running backs in the league, just over 34. 76% started in week 11. That should be 100% in week 12 as he gets the worst defense in the league. Alvin Kamara. So the fact that he's only started in 13% of leagues shows the season he's had. And we spoke about this the other week. Is it a case of like we've finally come off that? What we expect from him, is he a bust? But he's outperformed expectation for seems the last 2 or 3 years. He's probably just a natural life cycle of a running back coming to catch up with him. But this week he's got the Falcons, 25.78 fantasy points per game to running backs, the 4th most in the league. And they're going to have Kirk Cousins playing quarterback, so there's a good chance of some turnovers and then Saints find themselves on offense a little bit more. Over the last 4 games, they've been even worse over Falcons against running backs. They've been giving up 33.35 over that period. It's a poor season for him so far, but I see he finds himself into the top 20 for running backs this week, which will be Ed for only the 4th time this season, which was unthinkable when we were drafted him before the season began. Jared Goff, he's a player that's appeared a few times in starts, a few times in sits, and he does seem to be very matchup dependent, as in he performs where you'd expect him to, he doesn't where you wouldn't expect him to. He's got the Giants this week, 21.28 fantasy points per game to quarterback, 2nd most in the league. He's only QB 12 on the season. How many times has he been inside that top 12 to end up being QB 12 so far?
I reckon he's just been a consistent, like plodding along. So in the top 12 twice, maybe?
Twice, that's it. And we say this, don't when we look at that borderline, just because a player is at the QB 12 point does not mean they are regularly featuring there. Yeah, in fact, he's been in every game is probably what's led into that. This should be his 3rd, though, as the Giants have been consistently allowing QBs to perform against them. Right, next up, I'm going to go back against something I was adamant on only 2 days ago, Ed, on our review show from week 11, and that is Bears wide receivers. And I was annoyed when I saw this because I thought, well, I'm going to have to go back on what I've said now. So I'm saying Rome Odunze this week versus the Steelers as a must start. They're giving up 39.21 fantasy points per game to wide receivers, the most in the league. I said I didn't feel confident starting any of them on the main show, but we follow the consistent data points here at TH Fantasy Football, and we can't stray away from that just because of this. They're the worst in the league. Odunze is getting the most targets for the Bears. Therefore, the data would suggest Odunze should be a safe start this week. Should I be sticking by my guns, though, and not starting any Bears wide receivers, Eds?
I think it's interesting. I thought the Steelers' defense and secondary looked better last week. I think part of the reason that Jamar Chase did his horrible spitting was because of frustration at Jalen Ramsey, who kept him locked down for most of the game. And I think I know Flacco didn't have a great game and was struggling with his injury, but yeah, Chase especially struggled. So I mean, there's that caveat, but yeah, I mean, over the season, the Steelers have struggled, and you're right. Adunze is the one most likely. So if I had Adunze, I'd definitely be starting him this week.
And I think you probably will anyway, but that start percentage has been dwindling in the last few weeks. So I feel this is a week we feel a bit more confident. Hunter Henry versus the Bengals. We say it every week. They're giving it the most fantasy points against tight ends, 21.94. It's not been an appealing play week in, week out this year. And although it's currently starting 40% of leagues, that feels higher than it should be based on the stat lines he's been producing. It's tight end 13. He's only had 2 top 12 weeks, but he does see regular targets. Cincinnati regularly give up points and touchdowns to tight ends. So he would seem a logical start. We mentioned him later on as well. And then finally, Jacoby Brissett against the Jaguars, who are giving up the 5th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. He's had 5 starts, 5 top 12 finishes, yet he's only rostered in 22% of leagues and started in 14. For me, if you're struggling at QB this week, he is the most obvious logical plug-in from the waiver wire. And even at the time recording, he's still, and waivers have passed, he's available in 3/4 of leagues.
Yeah, he is somebody that I was looking at during the week, and he's certainly someone I'll be mentioning in our streaming quarterback show later this week, because he looks, I think we discussed before the show, locked in for most of the rest of the fantasy season. Murray's on IR, and he's deputized brilliantly. He's looked very solid. So he's definitely somebody that you'd be looking to pick up if you're in need at quarterback, without a doubt.
Before we move on, if you want to hear our starts, sits, heroes, zeros, DFS and streaming picks each and every week, please do click that subscribe button and join us here every week through the season. And we've got lots of stuff planned for the off season already for you as well. Sits of the week then, Davis Mills. He's done a decent job, a little bit Mac Jonesy, I think, in what we've seen as his deputizing so far. But currently is scheduled to play the Bills this week, who are given the 5th fewest fantasy points per game, 13.43. Over the last 4 weeks, though, that has only been 9.79 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, the 2nd fewest. As I said, Mills has been fair, but his QB 10 finish last week was more an indictment of how many poor quarterback weeks there were, because he got an only 16.36 fantasy points. So don't fall for the Mills resurgence hype this week, because I think the Bills will keep him quiet. JJ McCarthy has the Packers, and I don't know about you, Ed. I'm not overly enamored by JJ McCarthy at this point. He feels more hype around giving himself the nickname of his number on his shirt. Green Bay giving the 8th.
What nickname is he giving himself?
Oh, he's just 9.
Oh, that's a rubbish nickname.
It's been. It kind of goes into character as 9.
Oh wow! Okay.
It's like a rubbish addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Green Bay giving up the 8th fewest fantasy points game to quarterbacks on the season. Over the last 4 games, that's been only 10.70. I said I'm not sold on him yet anyway. I'm not going out on him at all. He's played only a handful of games considering he missed the whole of last season. I'm just not set on him yet. And this week, I have absolutely no interest.
I have to be honest. He to the naked eye, whenever I've seen him, and I've not seen him at any great length, he's just not looked good. I certainly don't think he's. Is it tough? Is it too tough to say he's not the long-term answer for Minnesota? Clearly, they think he is. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sold on him yet.
So he's played 1, 2, 3. We've had 5 games from him so far. We wouldn't be judging him harshly if this was week 6 of his rookie season.
True.
But we do need to judge him more harshly than that, because he has still had a year and a half in the building, learning everything. I don't know. Spoiler alert, I will be mentioning JJ McCarthy as a player that I would consider targeting for later in the season, because he has an exceptionally appealing fancy playoff run of opponents. I'll be talking about him in next week's show. Chase Brown versus the Patriots. So they're given the second fewest fancy points per game to running back, 16.74. He's had 3 top 12 weeks in a row. His use in the pass game is really, really appealing. So this, I accept, is a really, really tough call, because if you've got Chase Brown, how much depth do you have to actually bench him? But I could see a really quiet week for Chase Brown this week, and he could disappoint. Khalil Shakir, he had a stinker in week 11, and the bounce back does not look to be on this week as he faces the Texans, who are the second best in the league to fancy wide receivers. I feel we've mentioned this probably 3 or 4 times, but this once again a match where I'm going to have to say it. Packers wide receivers against the Vikings. So they're giving up the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receiver groups in the league, 26.34. Top 24 weeks. Dobbs, 2. Watson, 1. And yes, that was a solid outing last week. Wicks, none. Golden, 1. It's not a kind of a room that you're going to want to turn to. It's tough enough most weeks, let alone when you've got a solid defense who are giving up, say, not only the 4th fewest fantasy points game, but the 7th fewest passing yards in the league as well. So I would steer clear once more. And then finally, not want to take any pride in saying, because we have been a big champion of Javon Johnson from the preseason and through season so far, but he's got the Falcons, given it the 3rd fewest fantasy points against tight ends, and that is working out as only 1 touchdown all season to tight ends, and that tight ends are averaging just 38 yards per game. He has been a favourite of ours, but this is a week to sit Javon Johnson for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. The Falcons are very, very strong on defense. I just think Johnson's in a good vein of form. He had a mid-season dip after starting off really well, but he's had 4, I think, double-figure fantasy scores in a row. So he is in good form, getting lots of targets. So I would add that into the mix. But I agree, the Falcons are pretty impressive on defense.
Who are you looking at for our game of the week this week, Ed?
Well, I couldn't really go anywhere else. I had to go for the Colts versus the Chiefs. I went for a big NFC matchup last week, and this week it's a crucial AFC matchup. All sorts of real life and fancy implications. So the Colts come off the bye, sitting 8-2, looking favourites for the AFC South and favourites for the number 1 AFC seed, I would say. But yeah, the Jags are snapping at their heels in the AFC South, but the Colts still look like favourites. Whereas the Chiefs sit at 5-5, currently out of the playoff picture. They sit 3rd in the AFC West behind the Chargers and the Broncos, who sit top. I mean, if the Chiefs are to make the playoffs via a wild card, then they really need to be looking at winning this game, because to go 5-6 would make it very tough. So locked in. Let's start off with the Colts. Danny Dimes looked more human from a fantasy perspective before the bye, as he dropped into QB2 territory against the Steelers and Falcons, but he's QB8 overall, and you're probably starting him. The Chiefs are giving up the 10th fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, a touch over 15 points. So that is something to bear in mind. JT, surely he's matchup proof, so he won't care that the Chiefs are giving up the 7th fewest fantasy points a game to running backs. So JT is locked in and ready to go, and probably going to be a hero again, I would imagine, but we will wait and see. The Chiefs, Mahomes, he's had a quiet couple of weeks either side of the bye, admittedly against 2 very tough defenses in Denver and Buffalo, but he's still QB3, should be locked in against a more forgiving defense. The Colts defense are giving up the 10th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. So Rashee Rice, who has been Mahomes' top target since his return from suspension, should be in every starting lineup. Travis Kelce, also in fine form. He's been very reliable since week 5. Currently tight end 3, and the Colts are giving up the 4th most fantasy points per game to tight ends at just under 17. So he is another one to lock in. Moving into should payoff. With the Colts, the Chiefs defense are keeping all receivers quiet. So I can't go all in on some of the Colts playmakers. I mean, Michael Pittman is having a great season. He's wide receiver 11, but he struggled against that tough Falcons defense last week, or pre-bye, with his lowest fantasy score of the season. And the Chiefs are giving up the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Rinse repeat for Tyler Warren, I would say, who's having that excellent rookie season, tight end 4. He shone against the Falcons as he was Jones's top target, but beware that Chiefs defense, as they're also giving up the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends. Now, both should pay off if you're starting them, but Alec Pierce is more of a gamble at wide receiver, despite having his 2 highest fantasy scores of the season before the bye. I'd probably start Pierce if pushed, but he's a gamble. Moving on to the Chiefs, based on how the Colts are doing against wide receivers, I would consider starting Xavier Worthy, but he might be injured. Keep an eye on that. He has had a really disappointing season, and he is a risk because he's only averaging 4 receptions a game and has only broken 10 fantasy points on 4 occasions. Maybe worth a flex spot, but just keep an eye on his injury progress. Chiefs running backs are a conundrum, and the Colts defense are solid against running backs, conceding the 11th fewest fantasy points per game at just over 20 points. Pacheco is fit. He missed week 11, then I'd probably start him as he does get most of the rushing workload. However, he's only had 1 rushing touchdown all season, and he's very limited in the receiving game. Hunt could be worth a punt. Do you like that? As he has a touchdown in each of his last 3 games, and he's averaging just under 15 fantasy points per game in those 3 games. Best of luck. Colts, there's no one else for the Colts who is fantasy relevant except for Josh Downs. He has had several fantasy relevant weeks, but he's also had some stinkers like last time out against the Falcons. So I don't expect him to do much against that tough Chiefs defense. And the Chiefs, anyone else, rookie running back Rashard Smith, not involved enough, and any other Chiefs receiver. There are so many of them, I can't be bothered to list them. It's unlikely to score big. Too much of a lottery, really. I just think it's interesting when we look at tight end that Noah Gray has seen such little involvement this season. I mean, we were assuming that he was being lined up to take over from Kelsey, but is he going to be the long-term replacement? I think it's difficult to say at this stage.
It is, and I'll be really honest, there's a couple of our dynasty leagues where I've got a lot of Noah Gray because I've been waiting for that handing over of the torch. But in a couple of our leagues where we have slimmer benches, I've been a couple of times this season I've thought, do I keep him? And I think next season, I think he'll be dropped all over the place if we don't see something in the first 5-6 games, because it is, you're right, if he was the heir apparent, we'd have expected to see him being worked in a little bit more to preserve Kelsey, would you have thought? Or is the fact that the Chiefs aren't doing great means they're not taking any risks? They're using everything they've got to try to get to the playoffs. You can't save him for the playoffs if you don't qualify, can you? I guess that would be lovely. No Chiefs in the playoffs. What a dream. Right, Ed. We started off a couple of weeks ago with me romping ahead in fancy props, but it feels like it's getting a little bit closer.
Fantasy props. Pester versus Ed.
It's my favourite drop we've ever used. It is.
I'm not going to ruin the jeopardy by mentioning the season-long fancy prop, which I don't think that looks good for me, but which is worth 3 points. So, but yeah, it does look closer now.
So 6-4 currently. Tom gave you a bit of momentum, and you pulled that back last week because you gave me the AFC North QB special. A week that was an absolute shocker rather than special when it comes to AFC QB performances.
Indeed, yeah. So I asked you whether each AFC quarterback would go higher or lower than their season average. Flacco's average was based on his Bengals performances. You went lower for Lamar and Flacco, and they were both right. They were both significantly lower than their season average. But you went higher for Dylan Gabriel and Aaron Rodgers, but they were both significantly lower. So you should have gone lower across the board. So it went down to the tiebreak. You said Lamar would be the highest scorer, but inexplicably, with his mammoth 10.86, Joe Flacco was the highest scorer. So you lost on the tiebreak to make it 6-4. So how do I make it? How do I draw within a point, Mark?
So I've gone for this week tight end turmoil. I've gone for Turmoil mainly because of the alliteration, but also because tight end is always a very tricky position to pick, unless this year you have Trey McBride, who has been Mr. Consistent all the way through. So the option I gave you, Ed, was, would you like Trey McBride's scoreline this week, or would you like to choose any other two tight ends and take their combined score? Most weeks, Trey McBride would beat the combination on the screen, but the combination on the screen is what you selected.
Yeah, I was tempted by Trey McBride, but I couldn't go against that awful Bengals defense, so I had to go for that. So I've followed the stats really. I've gone against two defenses that are poor against tight ends. So Bengals, as we've established, are the worst team against tight ends for fantasy points per game. So I've gone with Hunter Henry. The Indianapolis Colts are the fourth worst team when it comes to conceding points to tight ends. So I've gone for Travis Kelce. So I've gone for the combined score of Hunter Henry and Travis Kelce. I think that should outscore Trey McBride this week. And
I completely agree with Travis Kelce. Hunter would have been in the mix for me as well. I think it's just his lack of consistency is one thing concerns me, but you're right. Probably the Bengals' inconsistency is the better option. I think I would possibly have gone Kittle, who has the Panthers this week.
I consider
just because of how solid he's been as well. But it's not an easy decision when it should be an easy decision. Any other position, even if it was Jonathan Taylor or two running backs, you're taking two other running backs. Like, even in that situation, this shows how dire tight end has become, that this is genuinely a bit of a thinker which you go for. So let us know down in the comments, would you rather have the double up of Hunter Henry and Travis Kelce, or the solo prowess of Trey McBride? Ed, to finish us up, we have Sunday Night Bet Club, and you have gone for what is one of our favourite bets, full stop, because our success rate is absolutely phenomenal with this for some reason, and also one of our favourite bets when we haven't got the time, energy, or inclination to think of a more complex bet.
Yes, I've gone for Scorigami. We love Scorigami. And just to explain to anyone who doesn't know, it is when there is a new unique scoreline that has never happened before in the NFL. So I think our success rate is phenomenal. I think it's close to 100% when we predicted this.
I think we've had one week that we've not had, isn't it?
Is that right? Okay. And I think there has been one Scorigami so far this season. There tends to be about 3 a season, 2 to 3 a season. So it's just about picking the right one, and it's almost always the same odds, as you can see on the screen. About a 1 in 15 chance, basically a 1 in 14 chance of it happening. So if you put a tenner on, you'll get £150 back. So let's see. With the Bengals defense, there's always a chance of some bizarre score. So I'll even predict the game. It will happen in the Bengals-Patriots game.
Amazing. I cannot wait to see 67-2. Are
you giving us a safety, are you? I love it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, just for fun. Right. That is us done for our Week 12 preview and our starts and sits. Go and check out our rest of our other shows as well. We'll be back on Friday with our streaming options for the week, and Saturday for our DFS show. And then a few tasty little shorts for you to have a look at on our shorts thread as well. Anything you want to add there before we go, Ed, or do you want to just call us our lift in?
I'll do just that. Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to the team from TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Twitter and Instagram.